Callous, glib, manipulative, deceptive, a liar. These are just some of the words that the Parole Board of Canada uses to describe Paul Bernardo. I can just use one word: psychopath. 9 months ago, the Minister of Public Safety was told by Correctional Services Canada that Paul Bernardo, Canada's most notorious child serial killer, was being moved out of a maximum security prison. And what did this government do about it? Absolutely nothing. This despicable child killer and rapist is sitting in a medium security prison still to this day. And he's there because he gamed a system. He manipulated Correctional Services Canada and got himself transferred to a medium security prison. And the only way he was able to do that was because of this Liberal government. They passed legislation, Bill C-83, which mandated that Correctional Services Canada needs to put prisoners in the least restrictive environment possible. This is the exact kind of Liberal legislation and Liberal incompetence that has allowed Canada's most notorious serial killer to be moved out of a maximum security prison to a medium security prison. The Public Safety Minister at the time called this decision shocking and incomprehensible. But what I find shocking and incomprehensible is that it's been 9 months and this Liberal government hasn't done a thing about it.
This raises a lot of questions, and it's disturbing. From what my clients were telling me, there seems to be a rather cavalier attitude about something so serious, and that makes them feel vulnerable and disrespected.
Instead of a government that wants to take responsibility and fix these problems, we have a government that wants to wash its hands of this whole affair. They've sent a request for a review down to Correctional Services Canada. And when that review came back, it said the decision was sound. There's nothing to see here. Well, I don't think it's sound when we're moving a notorious child serial killer out of a maximum security to a medium security prison. It's not sound for the victims who have to go through that trauma. It's not sound for our justice system. And it's the jobs of members of parliament, it's the job of this government to fix this mistake. In your experience, has the number of prisoner transfers, COVID notwithstanding, from maximum to medium security increased since Bill C-83 was brought into effect in June 2019?
So absolutely, the introduction of the SIU model has increased the amount of movement between institutions across the country. There's no doubt about that.
Conservatives have been fighting since last June for an investigation into this despicable transfer. And you'd think that it'd be common sense for Canadians to have an investigation as soon as possible so we could come up with a solution. Well, we're going into December, and we haven't even started committee hearings on this yet because these Liberals have been fighting us the entire way. Tim Danson, the lawyer for the victims' families, the victims of Paul Bernardo's murders, has said that this decision will lead to a cascading effect where Paul Bernardo has now been moved out of maximum and into medium. And the purpose of this, traditionally in correctional services, is to prepare that prisoner to be moved on to minimum security, and then to prepare that prisoner for parole.
He really does represent the highest level of dangerous risk to reoffend. And so that the risk of him reoffending with deadly force and brutality is extremely high.
This cannot be allowed to happen. Paul Bernardo must not only be returned to a maximum security prison, Canadians must be assured that this Correctional Services Canada decision will never be repeated, and that notorious killers like him will never be allowed to walk in the light of day as a free man. This is probably one of the most high-profile criminals in Canada. And if something like this happened with Canada's most high-profile criminal, how often is this happening with other criminals who have crimes that are just as despicable, just as heinous, but you might not know their names? Canadians need to know that they have a government that's in charge, that they have a government that's watching out for them, and that they have a government that's ensuring justice for the families of victims. At committee today, I reiterated the concerns of so many of the victims' families and Canadians with this disgraceful decision. And you know how the Liberals responded? They rolled their eyes. They accused me of trying to score brownie points. There's no brownie points to be scored here. This is a despicable decision for a despicable person. I shouldn't have to be talking about this today. Paul Bernardo should be sitting in a maximum security prison where he belongs. But the fact is that I have a sacred duty to hold this government accountable for their mistakes. And they made a very serious mistake in allowing Paul Bernardo to be transferred to a medium security prison. We need to investigate this outrageous decision. We need to investigate so that we can come forward with solutions to ensure that terrible decisions like this never happen again.